evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International. On tonight's headlines. The United States warns Moscow of damaging sanctions, including measures personally targeting Vladimir Putin if it moves ahead with an invasion of Ukraine, as Russian combat troops massing around the pro-Western country launch new exercises. The Omicron variant of COVID-19 is creating an obstacle course for the global economy, which will slow growth this year, notably in the world's two largest economies, the U.S. and China. The risk level related to the Omicron variant remains very high, according to the WHO, with the numbers of new COVID-19 cases hitting another record high last week. In Canada, the mayor of Brampton community, Mayor Patrick Brown, acknowledged the efforts of the Iglesia Ni Cristo, or Church of Christ, to find ways to help the community despite the ongoing pandemic.
And I know.
The United States warned Moscow of damaging sanctions, including measures personally targeting Vladimir Putin if it moves ahead with an invasion of Ukraine, as Russian combat troops massing around the pro-Western country launch new exercises. Tension appeared to be increasing, with the White House saying the risk of a Russian invasion of Ukraine remains imminent. Let's listen in.
See yourself personally sanctioning him if he did invade Ukraine?
Yes.
You would?
I would see that. There will be enormous consequences if he were to go in and invade, as he could, the entire country, or a lot less than that as well, for Russia, not only in terms of economic consequences and political consequences, but it'll be enormous consequences worldwide. This would be the largest, if he were to move in with all those forces, it would be the largest invasion since World War II. It would change the world.
Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson echoed that threat, saying sanctions would be heavier than anything we've ever done. French President Emmanuel Macron said he would talk by telephone with Putin on Friday, seeking clarification on Moscow's intentions. Let's listen in.
We agreed that we would respond in unison to any Russian attack on Ukraine, in unison, by imposing coordinated and severe economic sanctions, heavier than anything we have done before against Russia. And we agreed on the necessity of finalising these measures as swiftly as possible in order to maximise their deterrent effect.
Avec la Russie. C'est dans ce contexte et avec la même volonté, exigeante mais lucide, que j'aurai un échange vendredi matin avec le président Poutine. Ce n'est pas un déplacement, c'est un échange téléphonique.
A day after Washington said it was putting 8,500 U.S. troops on alert for possible deployment to bolster NATO forces in Europe, the Russian military announced it was conducting new drills involving 6,000 troops near Ukraine and within the Crimea region. The drills included firing exercises with fighter jets, bombers, anti-aircraft systems, and ships from the Black Sea and Caspian fleets, according to the Defense Ministry. According to Western officials, the Kremlin has already deployed more than 100,000 troops on Ukraine's borders, with reinforcements arriving from all over Russia. Washington also warned Russia ally Belarus that its authoritarian government would face a swift and decisive response if it helps Moscow invade Ukraine.
In recent days, we've also made clear to Belarus that if it allows its territory to be used for an attack on Ukraine, it would face a swift and decisive response from the United States and our allies and partners.
Moscow denies plans to invade the country. Russia instead blames the West for the tension and has put forward a list of demands, including a guarantee that Ukraine never join NATO and that NATO forces already in the former Soviet bloc pull back. The senior U.S. official said contingency plans were being drawn up to get Europe through the winter in case Russia moves to squeeze energy supplies. The White House announced on Tuesday that President Biden would meet with the Emir of gas-rich Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, on January 31st to discuss, among other issues, ensuring the stability of global energy supplies. Washington and its European allies are scouring global markets for alternative energy sources, even as Europe already struggles with soaring midwinter energy prices. In other news, the city of San Jose voted Tuesday to pass a law that will compel gun owners to take out insurance to cover any damage caused by their weapon, a move its mayor said was the first of its kind in the United States. The plan voted on by the city council will also require weapons owners in the Californian city to pay an annual fee that will fund a nonprofit group to help victims of gun violence. Take a look. Became the first city in the United States to enact an ordinance to require gun owners to purchase liability insurance and to invest funds generated from fees paid by the gun owners into evidence-based initiative to reduce gun violence and gun harm, according to Mayor Sam Liccardo in a statement on Twitter. The proposed ordinance, which must pass a second reading on February 8 before it becomes law in August, is also intended to cut down the costs to taxpayers. Firearms are prevalent in the U.S., where around 40% of adults live in a gun-owning household, according to the Pew Research Center. Almost 23 million firearms were sold across the country in 2020, and 40,000 people die from gunshots annually. Despite the horrific toll and the fact that a majority of Americans favor the tightening of gun control rules, repeated attempts to limit gun ownership have failed, with opponents arguing controls are an infringement of individual liberties. A press release from San Jose City Council said gun violence cost the city nearly $40 million a year, including for emergency police and medical response, healthcare, and investigations. While the Second Amendment protects every citizen's right to own a gun, it doesn't require taxpayers to subsidize that right, according to Liccardo. The $25 annual fee will help to fund programs aimed at reducing gun violence, as well as mental health, counseling, and addiction treatment. Ahead of the vote, the National Foundation for Gun Rights, an advocacy group, described the proposed law as a blatantly unconstitutional scheme. It said the National Foundation for Gun Rights is preparing a lawsuit to challenge this gun ownership tax in federal district court. Meanwhile, President Duterte said he would start talking about the May 9 elections and candidates in due time as part of his job as the head of the country. The president noted that this move is not a form of politicking, but rather merely informing the public based on the information he receives. Take a look.
With mga last month of, I will personally name the candidates and maybe what's wrong with them na kailangan malaman ng tao because you are electing a president. Sino yung pinaka-corrupt na kandidato? Sino yung kandidato na, this is part of, hindi ako namumulitika. I'm talking to you as your president. There are things such which you must know sa aking trabaho. And ito, kailangan ilalabas ko kasi we are talking of elections. We are talking of our country and the next rulers, so to say, so to speak. May importante malaman nila na pero ito bahala na kayo. If you want to believe in me, if you still believe me, I will tell you. But if you reject it, o ayaw ninyong may nawala, ang masasabi ko lang, bahala kayo. Total, it's your country. That's not only mine. And kailangan may malaman kayo na alam ko na hindi ninyo alam because alam ko. Why? Because I'm the president and I get all information.
Meanwhile, Mayor Isko Moreno said that President Duterte is entitled to his own observations on presidential aspirants he deems unfit to rule the country. Let's listen in.
Kaya ano yung karapatan ni Pangulo na siwalat ng kabulastugan. But I do believe anybody they can explain themselves, whoever they are. The end of the day. Boboto pa rin si President Duterte. On top of his obligation, being the president, he's still the citizen of the country. He's entitled to his observation and opinion.
Staying in the country, the Department of Health confirmed the presence in the country of the Omicron sublineage BA.1 and BA.2, which were detected in at least 49 countries and 17 U.S. states. Here's Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere. Take a look.
Mula sa dating 1.30% na nakuhang Omicron samples noong Nobyembre, tumaas na po ito sa 98.9% ngayong Enero. Makikita po sa graph ang mga purple bars na biglang tumaas ang Omicron variant. Pinapakita nito na mula sa samples na pinakamataas na ang Omicron variant dito sa ating bansa. Ang Omicron variant ay may sublineages na kinikilalang BA.1 at BA.2. Na-detect na ang BA.2 sa at least 49 na bansa at 17 US states. Habang kinikilala ang BA.1 bilang dominanteng sublineage internationally, dumadami na rin po ang nadidetect na BA.2 sa iba't ibang bansa. Sa tulong po ng UP Philippine Genome Center, upon further analysis, atin na pong nakapag-detect ang ating bansa, ang Pilipinas, ng Omicron sublineages BA.1 and BA.2. Kung ikukumpara po ang dalawa, ang BA.1 ay mas common sa mga returning overseas Filipinos at saka sa ating Region 5, or Region 5. Habang ang BA.2 naman ay nakita natin, this is the stealth Omicron. Mas common naman po siya sa mga local cases natin sa bawat rehiyon natin. Sa ngayon, kailangan natin maipaalala at tandaan ng ating mga kababayan, walang nakitang significant difference sa clinical presentation ang BA.1 at BA.2 at kinakailangan pa rin po ng masusing pag-aaral dahil limitado pa rin naman ang ating mga obserbasyon na nakukuha dito.
Vergere also said that apparently the country has already seen the worst-case scenario of Omicron when it comes to the number of cases, citing when around 18,000 cases was reached in the NCR. However, Vergere said that severe or critical deaths and deaths, which are worst outcome also, were not yet experienced, but stressed that the DOH is still closely monitoring it. Meanwhile, the Research Institute for Tropical Medicine, or RITM, today said that healthcare workers are not needed when administering self-test COVID-19 kits. RITM Laboratory Chief Dr. Armando Tandok said it's important that the instructions for the test kits are properly followed as this may affect the accuracy of the result. Take a look.
Mas madali po yung paggamit sa kanya. Una, hindi ito nangangailangan ng isang healthcare worker na magsasagawa ng nasopharyngeal o oropharyngeal na swab collection sapagkat yung samples po na itetest ay mga nasal na samples. Kapag po nasal, galing lamang po ito sa harapan o kaya hanggang gitnang bahagi ng ilong na maaaring kunin sa sarili o kung sa may kapansanan o sa mga bata ay maaaring kunin ng isang nakakatanda. May ibang test kit naman po na saliva ang sample na gagamitin. So sa pagsagawa naman po ng test mismo, may mga instruction naman na susundin kung paano ilagay yung sample sa cartridge at kung gaano katagal hihintayin bago magkaroon ng resulta. Opo, napakahalaga po na na pagkagagamit po ng self-test kit, basahin po na maigi, saka intindihin at masunod ng maayos yung mga instructions na kasama nung test kit. Kapag Kapag po kasi hindi nasunod to mula sa pagkolekta hanggang sa paggawa ng test at pag-interpret dito, maaaring maka-apekto po sa accuracy. Alam ko din po ay may lalabas na rin po na guidelines ang DOH para po dun sa parang guidelines paggabay po sa paggamit ng ganitong uri ng test kit. Sa mga manonood po natin, saka mga tagapakinig po, mahalaga po na yung gagamitin natin ng mga kit sa pag-test ay otorisado po ng ating FDA na siyang pangunahing ahensya po na nag-approve ng mga authorization nito.
Meanwhile, according to Dr. Tandok, both of the self-test kits approved by the Food and Drug Administration require a nasal sample. Dr. Tandok also emphasized that it's important to use kits approved by the FDA. Meanwhile, Austria on Wednesday announced it was ending a lockdown for those unvaccinated as it prepares to become the first EU country to make COVID-19 jabs mandatory from next week. The government last November ordered those not vaccinated or recently recovered from coronavirus to stay at home with limited exceptions, such as going to work, as the country battled a surge in cases. But with intensive care units no longer at capacity, Chancellor Karl Nehammer said the general order to stay at home would be lifted from next Monday.
Si, ça a commencé à partir de la quatrième. Énormément de patients, il y a eu énormément de burn-out.
It's very high, the WHO said late Tuesday, with the numbers of new COVID-19 cases hitting another record high last week. Over 21 million new cases were reported, representing the highest number of weekly cases recorded since the beginning of the pandemic. Take a look. This is according to the World Health Organization in its weekly epidemiological coronavirus update. The UN Health Agency said the number of new infections increased by 5% in the week to Sunday compared to the 20% rise registered the week before. A slower increase in case incidence was observed at the global level as well, the WHO said. Nearly 50,000 new deaths were also reported. It added a similar figure to the week before. The report said Omicron continued to increase its dominance globally over the other variants of concern. The WHO said that of samples collected in the last 30 days that have been sequenced and uploaded to the GSAID Global Science Initiative, Omicron accounted for 89.1%. Delta, previously the world's dominant variant, now makes up just 10.7%. Meanwhile, a coronavirus hit Australian warship docked in Tonga today, delivering desperately needed aid to the volcano and tsunami-struck nation under strict no-contact protocols. Tongan Health Minister Saya Piukala said the crew of the HMAS Adelaide would follow drastic health protocols to ensure the remote Pacific Kingdom remains one of the few places in the world still free of COVID-19. The warship is carrying about 80 tons of relief supplies, including water, medical kits, and engineering equipment. Despite all crew members testing negative before departing Brisbane, officials in Canberra on Tuesday said 23 coronavirus cases had been detected on the vessel. Piukala said that number had increased to 29 by today. The ship's 600-plus crew are fully vaccinated, and the Australian Defence Force said Tuesday that the initial 23 patients were asymptomatic or only mildly affected. Meanwhile, pop megastar Elton John on Tuesday postponed 2 concerts in Dallas, part of what is expected to be a lengthy farewell tour after testing positive for COVID-19. The concerts, part of John's farewell Yellow Brick Road tour, were scheduled for January 25 and the 26th. Both John and the American Airlines Center, where the shows were to take place, said they will be rescheduled and fans should keep their tickets. John said he expected to be healthy enough to play his show on January 29 in Little Rock, Arkansas. The tour, which is anticipated to be Sir Elton's last, has run into pandemic-era cancellations and postponements like many other performing arts events.
So humbling to stand here.
Meanwhile, the Danish government plans to lift its COVID restrictions on February 1, despite registering a record number of infections. But with vaccine rates high, the health ministry said on Wednesday. Health Minister Magnus Hanneke wrote a letter to lawmakers proposing the de facto lifting of all domestic restrictions such as mask wearing and early closings for bars and restaurants. The country of 5.8 million people registered 46,000 new cases on Tuesday. But our current assessment, they said, is that the epidemic will soon peak, that he wrote on Twitter. More than 60% of Danes have received a third dose 1 month ahead of the health authorities' schedule. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Ako'y kikil pero pikil na pikil. Di masabi ang laman ng damdamin. Kasi baka isipin mo ang dali-dali kong babae. Ako'y kikil na kikil pero pikil na pikil. Minsa'y napipikon na sa takot kong.
Hello everybody, it's Sheng Belmonte and please do catch me on Letters and Music this coming Sunday, 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. only here on Net 25. See you!
Nakakagigil pero merong magpipigil sa puso kong ito na ikaw ang tanging inihilig.
Global growth is getting a downgrade as high inflation and the impact of the Omicron variant weigh on the forecast. The IMF said in its latest quarterly update to the World Economic Outlook report, released on January 25 in Washington, D.C. IMF First Duty Managing Director Gita Gopinath said the global recovery is multi-speed and divergent, meaning that some regions and countries are performing better than others, but the bulk of the downgrade is due to increasing uncertainty in the United States and China. Take a look.
The IMF's latest World Economic Outlook therefore anticipates that while Omicron will weigh on activity in the first quarter of this year, this effect will fade starting in the second quarter. Other challenges and policy pivots are expected to have a greater impact on the outlook. We project global growth this year at 4.4%, which is 0.5 percentage point lower than previously forecast, mainly because of downgrades for the United States and China.
Well, in the case of China, we have a significant downgrade for 2022. Growth is projected to be 4.8% now. And the reason for that is, one, the weakness in the real estate sector. We're seeing continued retrenchment of investment there, and that's one of the factors. The second factor is the weakness in recovery in private sector consumption. That's because we are also expecting there to be more outbreaks, more frequent outbreaks. Well, I mean, I think they have done a good job in terms of communication, but I think the problem is going to get a little bit harder.
Now, one major uncertainty is also the ratcheting up of tensions between Russia and NATO, with the buildup of troops along the Ukrainian border. Again, let's listen in.
So, to your question about what would be the impact of a conflict between Russia and Ukraine, the consequences for the energy markets would be a further increase in prices of oil and natural gas, and therefore of energy costs more broadly for many countries in the world. So, in terms of headline inflation numbers, that certainly could keep headline inflation much more elevated for longer. Of course, we are hoping, like all of the international community is, that there can be a peaceful resolution to this issue.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Ay lalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Please catch me on Letters and Music on air and online this coming Saturday, 1 to 2 p.m. only here on Net 25. See ya!
Welcome back. Let's check out the stories making headlines around the world. The U.S. Coast Guard has launched a search for 39 people reported missing when a boat capsized off the coast of Florida in a suspected human smuggling venture. The Coast Guard in Miami said it received a report from a Good Samaritan who rescued a man clinging to a capsized vessel approximately 45 miles east of Fort Pierce Inlet. The survivor said the boat left Bimini in the Bahamas on Saturday night and had encountered rough weather before it capsized. An image released by the Coast Guard showed the capsized vessel in the water with a man straddling the hull. As you can see here, the survivor was taken to a hospital to be treated for dehydration and sun exposure, according to the Coast Guard. Meanwhile, Tropical Storm Ana has killed at least 46 people in Madagascar and Mozambique, along with Malawi, which lost most of its power because of flooding, according to authorities in the three countries. The storm, which formed over the east coast of Africa's island Madagascar, has brought heavy rains, causing flooding and mudslides in the capital, Antananarivo. After crossing the Indian Ocean, the storm made landfall on mainland Africa on Monday, bringing heavy rains and strong winds in Mozambique's central and northern districts. Mozambican officials on Tuesday said 3 people were killed, with at least 49 injured in the province of Zambezia. The UN forecasts the storm will cause widespread flooding, displace people, and damage infrastructure. Emergency services attend the scene in the aftermath of an explosion that rocked a major highway in the Greek capital of Athens, where 1 person was hurt. The blast smashed windows in neighboring buildings and happened shortly before 0500 GMT in what appears to be an office block, according to the fire department. State news agency ANA said a 78-year-old man has been taken to hospital with burn injuries. The fire department said 9 fire engines and over 20 firemen were dispatched to the scene. The cause of the blast is under investigation, but Greek media said the fire department said that it could have been caused by a gas leak. Meanwhile, thousands rallied for Indigenous rights and held a silent march through central Sydney on Australia Day. Take a look.
I feel like the real burden is white Australia. It's not a burden to fight for what you believe in, no matter where you come from, wherever in the world, who you are. We're always going to fight for what we believe in, right? What we love. And this is our people, our culture, who we are, our identity. This is what we're fighting for. So the real burden is the colonisers. The real burden is the discrimination and the racism, and seeing no change still to this day in 2022.
The Invasion Day demonstrations are some of the biggest gatherings of First Nations activists and supporters every year, held in cities around the country, calling for an end to the celebration of a day that marks the arrival of the first British colonists in Sydney Cove. In other news, Hong Kong's top justice defended the impartiality of judges handpicked to hear controversial cases of national security, dismissing widespread concerns over the rule of law at the ceremonial opening of 2022's legal year. Andrew Chung said justices presiding over national security cases were impartial, but declined to disclose how many Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam has so far appointed to national security cases or reveal their identities. Take a look.
Regarding the declaration of the existence of judicial independence in Hong Kong as a fact. Now, if it is a fact, it can be stated. I think it is good for public confidence that as head of judiciary, I stated as a fact that there exists judicial independence in Hong Kong, so that people can have confidence in our system and has confidence in Hong Kong as a special administrative region governed by the rule of law, underpinned by an independent judiciary. As for the numbers and list of the designated judges, now again we respect the chief executive since she is the appointing or designation authority and vested also with the rights to disclose the names and the details of the designated judges.
A key aspect of the security law is that instead of the usual trial by jury, national security cases are decided on by judges selected by Hong Kong's leader. More than 160 people have been arrested under the national security law, including activists and journalists from pro-democracy news outlets. Often denied bail, many suspects have been detained for long periods before trial. Last week, the American Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong released a survey. that showed 68% of respondents saying their confidence in the rule of law had fallen in the last year. Meanwhile, Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen held online talks with Myanmar military leader Min Aung Hlaing today. A Cambodian official said Hun Sen called on the junta chief to implement the 5-point consensus agreed by ASEAN leaders last year and to facilitate first visit by ASEAN Special Envoy to Myanmar in the near future. Hun Sen also called on all parties in Myanmar to cease violence and urged Min Aung Hlaing to help distributing humanitarian aid in his country, according to the official. Cambodia's strongman ruler Hun Sen flew to Myanmar earlier this month for talks with the junta, the first foreign leader to visit since the generals seized power almost a year ago. Myanmar has been in chaos since the February 1 coup, which ousted Aung San Suu Kyi's civilian government and ended the country's decade-long dalliance with democracy. And the news continues. Zero Eagle News.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
May pera sa basura, lalo na kung magagawa ang iba't ibang bagay mula sa mga recyclable material na inaakala ng iba na itatapon na. May ilang barangay sa bansa ang nagre-recycle ng basura at makikita ang iba't ibang bagay na gawa sa basura. Mga dekorasyon sa bahay, sa mga proyektong ito, nagiging malinis ang kapaligiran bukod sa mayroon pang pagkakakitaan.
Welcome back. This year's Los Angeles Art Show kicks off with the themes mostly touching on NFT-backed art and the threat of climate change. Here's Eva Basalyahe at the scene. Eva.
47th Annual LA Art Show once again creates a global gallery of modern, contemporary, digital, and interactive art. Every piece has a story, and every artist, a message.
The other cascade is a collective knitting to talk about the problem of pollution of one of the biggest rivers in Latin America, whose name is Rio Santiago, and is very near from my city, Guadalajara. And people there are suffering from the contamination and pollution of this river since many years ago. Instead of water, we have a toxic foam that kills. Rivers and water must give life, but instead now it's kill people. So that's it's very tragic. The knitting is a communitary knitting, a social knitting. We knit with many people. 400 people knit in this work, help us. These people are from the villages besides the cell down near the river, and they are affected. They are suffering from cancer and different illness. Many people die. And also, we knit with people from the cities, the city of Guadalajara, because the problem starts in the city. So this is many people knitting to make visible this terrible problem of pollution, and also to make links, to talk, create a space of dialogue and to reflection.
This one, it's from a project about gentrification in Brooklyn that I've been dealing in the last 12 years. It's based on an image of Williamsburg Plaza from 1906, and then I came back to the same exact location to document all the surrounding block that grew up from this point. So this image condensed 100 years of gentrification. This is another piece from the gentrification project. It shows Brooklyn Bridge Park at the beginning when they start to construct it at 2004. Then 10 years later when it got finished. So it's a new way and study, a vertical study of gentrification, where there is a lot of density it's a force that brings gentrification up. So that's why I'm celebrating these panoramas in a vertical way. This particular image is very hard because it has a lot of images and footage from 9/11, because I wanted to show the wound and the healing process. So it's a very compelling composition that calls you in, and from far we can appreciate the abstraction qualities, but when you're getting in and see the concrete details, it stops from functioning as an abstract. That's why I title it Concrete Abstract, because this image has this duality inside them that function in both ways.
Jetson Studios is a stained glass and art glass studio. We've been around since 1897 here in Los Angeles. It is a family-owned business. It's still it's in its 5th generation. And so what we are representing here today is artist collaborations done in glasswork. A lot of the pieces that you see here today, they're all different artists, and each of the artists have their own, concept and design. And so a lot of the work is, they have a story behind it, and so if you read further, with the description, you'll learn about what each piece is about. And we are there to help translate the artist's work to the best of our technical specialty, and also guided by them to make sure that we we are able to achieve their vision. What we have here, we have a model of what we call the Pagoda Pavilion. The Pagoda Pavilion will be an actual architectural structure where you can experience and immerse yourself into it. It'll be about 14 feet high, 18 feet wide. You'll be able to walk into it, and it will be hopefully set on an exterior space. So what you see here is actually 5 of the 44 panels that we've already fabricated. So once we're done with the show, we go back into the studio and we'll continue to fabricate the rest of the pieces. So this is all designed by James Jean.
For my 3 series, I have the first one I did was movement, and that's behind us here. And then there's the transfers you can see over here, and it's one shot from my limited love series. And movement series is reason that I call movement is because I multiple exposure around 25 times, but I move in between. So I paint with my camera, you can say. When I started shooting this as an art, it was 15 years ago, and it was a little to break away from the very sharp photography where you could see everything, and there was nothing to discover. Everything was you saw straight away, and I think for me. I needed to have something that was a little deeper. And actually, if you start looking closer to the images, you find details that you don't see in the beginning. An old technique from the 80s when Polaroid was big, in the 80s we shot a lot of Polaroid before we shot film at that time. And the technique is called transfer. I shoot on a professional Polaroid with a negative, so I transfer the negative to watercolor paper instead of transfer to the Polaroid paper. And the watercolor paper structure and the surface is not that good, so it cracks in that process. And then again, I find the distortion, I like it's not perfect. In this fair, there's not that much photography. And I often sold to collectors who's only been buying paintings before, because they find me as a link between the painting and photography, because as I said earlier, I feel I paint with my camera.
The word duality was often attached to and representative of the work on display. Borrowing from this idea, we wanted to know what impact art could have on people, as well as what effect people could have on artists.
Art is very subjective, so some people love it and some people don't. And even now with all these NFTs trendy going on, some people just don't get it, and some people are just very into. So it's like for everything, you find markets for everything. But I think art is what you feel about a work, a piece, right away in the instant. So I think that is art for me. It's just the feeling, what you see and what you feel the instant that you see the piece.
I have this pleasure of meeting the people and having conversation with them to learn and to meet them. It's a very fulfilling stage, and I'm really thankful that it works like that, and it's really great.
The thoughts and feelings art evokes can differ from person to person. But if the desire to search for a deeper meaning to art awakens in people, then the artist has done their job. Eva Pasayaje, Eagle News, Los Angeles.
And finally in our news, once again, the Iglesia Ni Cristo, or Church of Christ, through the FYM Foundation, continues to show their love and care to their fellow men who are in need through the Aid to Humanity Outreach Program. The Aid to Humanity Outreach Program of the Iglesia Ni Cristo, which is being done nonstop in different parts of the world, manifests kindness out of love and compassion to those who are less privileged in this world. Now, the Mayor of Brampton Community, Mayor Patrick Brown, acknowledged the efforts of the Iglesia Ni Cristo, or Church of Christ, to find ways to help the community despite the ongoing pandemic. Take a look.
Well, I just want to congratulate you on 15 years of offering spiritual guidance to the community. That is worth celebrating. You're right. And I know it's a little bit different right now with COVID protocols and with Omicron in the community, but one of the beautiful things during this pandemic has been our faith communities have stepped up again and again. And this is an example of that, to have a winter clothing drive for the less fortunate, trying to get everyone to show their generosity and heart is an example of the love we see displayed every day by our faith communities. And for a long time, you have been doing that in spades in Brampton, and I want you to know the city appreciates you. And during times of adversity, having strong faith communities that can help the community during those difficult days are so important. And I know there's light at the end of the tunnel. I know there's better days ahead. This pandemic has been bumpy, but we do know that very soon it's going to be in the rearview mirror where you can have large services again in person. But I want to thank you for having this in a safe manner today, seeing that for the most part of it, it's been outdoors and you've ensured physical distancing and everyone is wearing a mask. Thank you for that. And I brought a certificate of recognition for the Church of Christ, and I'll read this to you, and this is from our members of council. On behalf of members of City Council, it is my distinct pleasure to extend congratulations to you in celebrating 15 years of the Lord's goodness and blessings. May your church continue basking in the Lord's love, and may His glory be your delight, and His grace your strength. And this is dedicated to the Church of Christ, Iglesia ni Cristo, Brampton congregation, wishing you many, many more years of continued success. And thank you for the spiritual nourishment that you're giving our community. And on this note, I'm going to present this to your pastors. And I'll just put my mask on.
Thank you very much for allowing us to join in your 15 years, and it's very telling as your congregation that to celebrate, you want to give back. And our unit is very appreciative of all the donations that you will be providing. It will definitely serve many members of our community at large across not only Brampton, Mississauga, but the GTA, and you will be making a difference in people's lives.
Now, as we heard there, Peel Officer Jennifer Horner stated that it is inspiring to see a church organization have a community outreach as a form of celebration. Brampton, Iglesia ni Cristo in Brampton is celebrating 15 years, and she's thankful for the kind gesture that everyone who needs winter clothing gear could benefit from the event. It is indeed a heartwarming feeling and a pleasant sight to see that even in these trying times, the Church of Christ continues to provide community service that benefits everyone in need. More than 100 bags of winter gear were donated by the members of the Iglesia ni Cristo Church of Christ to the community of Brampton to celebrate their 15th anniversary, and this was last January 16. As always, I'll end the day on a thoughtful note. Our ability to look back and smile at our past is proof that God's plan is to keep us moving forward. This has been Eagle News International. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay alert, stay informed, because we live in interesting times. Good night.